as if there was so much information. It was trying to link it all. And it was only in the end of the Paleolithic lectures that somehow we were able to link it. And so, Anne, I want you to be absolutely amazing today, right? I want you to show off your talents, and I want you. Anne? Have you heard about that latest museum in France that's done a complete replica of a Paleolithic cave? Have you come across that news?
No,
Yeah,
I didn't. Sorry.
It's vague in my head, but I've seen it. What they've done, they spent tens of millions of pounds in doing a complete replica of this cave using that 3D technology.
Well, they're very good at that. Yeah, they're very good at that. Yeah.
And it's great that they've gone through getting the colours and they've spent so much time. And I just thought, I think the figure was something like 25 million or something. And I just thought over a year that would cost probably a lot more than that. Have you got any news for us, Anne, today?
Well, the only thing I thought was interesting is we're all finding clay pipes. It's one of the first things a lot of people find, and I just put that article in about the load of clay pipes that were found. Like loads of clay pipes, and on this particular spot, and it was it's a custom in Ireland that. After the burial, they all sit round and smoke a clay pipe, and that's the men and the women, and they drop it. They just drop it there, and I wondered if they do that anywhere else, in any other countries.
Do you know what? We've gone completely off tangent, but I love it. I love it when people talk about things like this, and I can remember. You are very right about this. That some of the first finds that I was ever finding in archaeology, I went to Sophia Gardens in Cardiff, and I remember looking in the flower beds, and there were some clay pipes there. And in many ways, when you soldiers in the Napoleonic War, for example, when one of their pals would die, they would drink to the pal, and then they would bury a bottle of liquor with them. And probably none of the liquor left in there. And one of the clear differentiations with clay pipes is that initially they could only be used once.
Right.
So I'm gonna be a bit sort of, it's not the Irish sort of using this tradition per se. It's just that we're toasting somebody, but these artifacts are very disposable.
Sorry, that was a bit off away from Mesolithic.
No, it's good. It's good to be off. It's good to be off that. And right, and anything? Who else have we got? We got Henry. Anything you'd like to say? Specifically, I know you'd be interested in this French find, being that you're of French lineage. Anything you want to say, Henri, as we should call you properly?
I think they've discovered the Welsh government's new bypass for Newport.
Go on.
The Welsh government.
The Roman road in the Preseli Mountains that follows a prehistoric track. They think, inverted commas, would be the route for bringing the stones to Stonehenge.
Oh my God. So I've heard about this Preseli Mountain find, and the way you've described it is exactly the way I would describe it. Is that any Roman routeways would have followed any existing routeways. Now, interestingly enough, I travelled through Ystrad Vasta yesterday, and it's a long, wild road that you don't break down on, and it goes on for a best part of 15 miles, and it goes across the moors and all the rest of it. It's basically a shortcut across the Brecon Beacons. And I went past the Mine Clear stone, which is a huge, massive lozenge-shaped stone, and that route is classed as one of the San Helens. And I remember driving along there, and I thought, well, you may only use this route once or twice, for Roman soldiers in the Roman period altogether, and then brandishing the name Roman road is very incorrect, because it was neither built by the Romans, neither conceived by the Romans, but it was used by the Romans. And I think that's a very, very good point that you made there, Henry. I appreciate you saying that. So as we go on from Henry, and we ask Goff, is there any news from you, Goff? And what I'm going to do, I'm rudely going to phone Steve so that we could have a conversation to see if anyone in the Lantwit Major class has actually got anything to say. But before, as I'm phoning Steve now, Steve, stay there. I'll put you on speaker in a moment. And we got a bit of feedback, so we'll see how this works. So, Goff, anything you'd like to say?
Yeah, I went to the wonderful flower festival on Sunday for the Jubilee celebration in Llanmaes Church. I noticed on one of the walls something I hadn't noticed before. It was exposed, and similar drawings to the ones in Llancarvan. Am I right in thinking that?
Yeah. Llanmaes. Basically, you've got Saint George slaying the dragon.
Right. Yeah. I didn't know that. Tell me that.
Because when that was the first walk that you came on with Dennis, wasn't it?
Yeah, but you didn't go in the church. It was locked. It was dark.
Yeah, we didn't go in the church that night, but it was I did mention it, and I'm glad you've actually seen it, so that's good. I'm glad you saw it.
Okay.
Glad you saw it. I'm glad you saw it. So what we're going to do, we're going to see if this works now. If there's any feedback, Stephen.
Hello, Carl, how are you doing? All right.
I'm fine, lovely. Is there any news from you guys?
Any news from anybody here? Sorry, happy go yesterday. And
so yeah, this is the.
This isn't working.
It's sort of working. What I'm going to do is, I think I'll do it this way. Hang on. Yeah, that was the find that and that was the find that was just mentioned earlier on, and I've not seen any of it news myself, but obviously I'm hoping to update on that soon. So has anyone got anything else they want to say from Lantwit Major?
Kathy's just saying you can find the Guardian in the article.
Okay, I will. Thank you very much. Okay, then we're going to crack on. And thanks for that, Steve. And I'm going to call off now, right? Thanks for that. There was a little bit of feedback then, so I'm going to see if I can. We need a bit of a better speaker for Lantwit, and I'll see. I'll see what the money can do. Well, we might get we'll see if we can get some technology in for next week. So see if we can get a decent mic in there, so we can allay these problems. So mic for Lantwit. Right. Anyway, so I've taken a note of that. We could have a chat at the end or something. Anyway, so I want us to crack on, and I think one of the first things that we need to do is look at this wonderful site at Howick, and if we can just we haven't done Jane. Oh my God. You know, it's almost as if we haven't heard from Jane for such a long time. She doesn't exist. Right, let's carry on with the lecture. So, sorry, Jane. Anything you'd like to say?
No, honestly, if there's anything archaeological over this last period, I've completely forgotten it, and everything else, it will be totally boring to you. So just drift past me.
Oh, we used to do that anyway, so there's nothing new.
I know. Well, feel free to continue.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate that. You know, and it's fine. Everybody, wave at Jane from Lantwit Major. Go on. They're all waving at you, Jane.
I know. I can see. I'm waving back. Hi.
Hey, And do you know what? Do you know what? For such a long time, Lynn and Chris are the same person. And in fact, Chris is in the room today. It's just she looks a bit like Lynn. Stop talking crap. Okay, right. Let's crack on. Oh my God. Sorry.
That too.
Sorry. I did not mean to say that then. So, right, okay. So what I'd like to do is we got this sharing on the screen. And the place that we're going to go to now is, in fact, Howick, which is a village on the Northumberland coastline. And there it is. So we sort of zoom in. So it's by Chepstow. So we sort of zoom back out again, and it's off a part of our coastline, on sort of along north of Newcastle, south of the Scottish border. And the one thing about Howick is that, as I've mentioned it in a lot of lectures, and I would like to just get straight into it. And I would like to sort of give you the wonderful marvels of this site. Now, one of the things that we do have is access to some nice images today. And there's a really nice plan. And what you can say about this site is it doesn't come alone. One of the things that I do say in archaeology is that archaeology should never come alone. It's always multidisciplinary. And I would say, and I would like to sort of expand on this, that when Steve joins my Thursday evening classes and joins my Thursday evening classes, at 6 o'clock, we do talk about the idea that everything is linked and everything is multidisciplinary in archaeology. I used to say that archaeology is about layers, but archaeology is about more than layers. Archaeology is about layers within layers, multi-layers. And even though that sounds a different concept and more complicated than what Flinders Petrie might tell us about layers and then seriation and all the other great archaeologists of the past, when we do see the past, even a Mesolithic site, we might ponder over what on that Mesolithic site could be Paleolithic, and so on and so on. With the site at Howick, as I say, it doesn't come alone. It comes with a Bronze Age burials. It comes within a landscape of the Iron Age and the medieval period, and within something that we don't really usually talk about, extensive erosion. Now, one of the greatest problems I've had with the Howick site is trying to evolve it into understanding the site without the usual complications of archaeology. And what I'm trying to say is that I like to say that the site was miles away from where the coastline is today. And I basically say, it's a habitational site and it was used over a long period of time and all these things. Well, it was used for at least 100 years. Was it far away from the coastline back then? I would say yes, but the archaeology tells me something different, because we find the remains of seal bone. We find the remains of seal bone on site. We find lots of remains of mollusks on site, and then it could be argued, well, it was near the coastline then. But the problem is, because the site is associated with glacial deposits, glacial till, glacial layers, lots of those glacial layers have been eroded and moved away by the sea over the many thousands of years. So where does that put Howick in the level of it being near the coastline? It may have been associated with an inlet. It may have been associated with a saline inlet, a marshy area, and hence why they were able to access all this flora and fauna that we see archivally documented within the archaeology from the site. So probably not going to say any more about that, because it then does take away, if we do, the majesty of the site. And it is a majestic archaeological site, because overnight it paints a very flowery picture of the Mesolithic period. And this is one thing that I was saying on Tuesday. I was saying, in the one hand, in the Paleolithic period, which is obviously 12,000 years ago, we're now in the Mesolithic period. If you do comparisons, for example, in the Paleolithic period, we look at bits of bone, and we look at bits of animal bone, and we look at shells, and we look at this, and we look at that, and we look at this, and we look at that, and that's all we've got. That's not all we've got, because we're able to interpret it. It's quite a wonderful set of archaeological data from the Paleolithic period. We come to Howick and we get thousands of artifacts, but then we look at other Mesolithic sites from the similar period, 10,000, 11,000 years ago, and the archaeology, there's not much to go by, and it's usually because the archaeological work hasn't been done thoroughly and properly, meaning that there's a bias in the archaeology. And when you've got a bias in the archaeology, you do get flaws with the interpretation and understanding. It can be akin, if we want to use a modern metaphor, it's like Anne deciding that she's going to move to another house, and then suddenly everything's in boxes and everything goes into the van, and there's a few things left in the cupboards, and there's something left in a bedroom, and people go in that house and try and get an idea of what Anne's life was like, and they wouldn't get much of a picture. That's because everything's been boxed and moved away. If everything was in that house and in context, and everything was thoroughly examined before it was put in the boxes, we'd be able to get a perfect idea of what Anne's life is like. And unless you do archaeology like that, there is a great deal of bias in the record. You've got to get every single piece of archaeological evidence. I am one of those types of archaeologists. In fact, I'm so obsessed with every single bit of detail in archaeology that it takes me years and years to try and produce an archaeological report. Most archaeologists don't keep all the artifacts. For example, it was again with Anne that we went to the archaeological excavations at Culzean, and I'm sure it was you, Anne. And there was a group of us, and we went to Culzean, and they had an archaeological excavation there. This was years ago. And it was really nice, and they were working, and they were working on the granary, and there was these great slabs on the floors, and then over on the left, if you can remember, Anne, and I'm sure it was you, there was piles and piles and piles and piles of tile. Can you remember that, Anne?
Yes, I remember.
Now,
I think I was there, but I think it was Kathy and someone else who was looking through them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But the point, I'm glad you remember that. The point I would like to make is that they were almost discarded, and lots of them, it was in, and there were things on them, and they say, oh, right, you're not really interested in that. The problem is not being interested in that. It skewers the archaeological data.
Mm.
Okay, I'm going to, Anne, if I made the estimate 5,000 bits of tile, would that be too much? If I said 2,000, would that be closer? But whatever number we're looking at tiles, and I know I just jumped in there, that's still important, and that's relevant. And making it irrelevant, you're missing some of the information. And this is why, when we look at sites such as Howick, every single piece of data is important. Every single piece of data, and the same should be said with Roman sites. And we don't give Roman sites the due respect that they deserve. It's a bit like going with Keith to the battle site of Waterloo and thinking, oh, by the way, Keith, what we're not going to do is we're not going to be really interested in all the line of all the lines of where the cannons were over there. We're not really interested in that. That's not really part of the data from Waterloo. We're not really interested in where the line infantry for the 84th French Regiment was. And we're not really interested in what we're going to do. We're just going to go to what happened at the end and whatever. We're ignoring data, right? every single piece of data from the Battle of Waterloo site is important to get an idea of the Battle of Waterloo site. If you don't get every single piece of data, you cannot understand the Battle of Waterloo site. There's so much information out there about the Battle of Waterloo site, but you have to look at everything. Where archaeologists say, oh, you've got to be sort of a bit, you've got to be a bit sort of selective on your archaeology when you're working on archaeological sites. I don't agree. I think everything's important, and this is the point I want to make with Howick and every single archaeological site. By ignoring data, you're ignoring the evidence. And anyway, I've spoken enough about that, and we've gone down a couple of sort of holes. But
rabbit holes.
That's the one. I couldn't think of that, rabbit holes. Do you know what? I was listening to this. I was listening to one of the doctors on BBC Radio 4, and she could not remember the name of what was it now? I can't even remember, but it was a stethoscope. I can't even say it. You couldn't even remember what she was trying to say, and sometimes you have these blockages of words. Anyway, so I made a pig's ear of that as well. So what I'd like to do is, this is a reconstruction of one of the buildings at Howick, and this image itself. Is this what one of the buildings look like? Are we right or are we wrong? So what I'm going to do then is I'm going to go back to here, and what we do have is actually a site plan, which is great. So interesting enough, on this site plan of our Howick site, what we do find is there in the middle of the screen, more or less, you've got the remains of what they're interpreting as a hut, and basically it's 6 meters across, and it's very close to the cliffs. It's being eroded away. You see the point that I made earlier on, that this would have been far inland at one point. So why is there lots of evidence of mollusks and seal bones on the site? And you're thinking, well, there's something that's it may have been part of an estuary location rather and far away from the actual coast, and that's the way I've explained it. So again, I would like to crack on a little bit, and I've got a bit of an overview of the Howick site, and then we go into a little bit of detail, and then we go into more detail, and we look at hazelnut shells. Now, I'm hoping that we're all up to speed on the lecture about limpets, and if not, I will answer some questions. And when we were looking at limpets, one of the key things that I was saying about limpets, it was evidence of agriculture and farming, and it was evidence that they had they were doing all sorts of wonderful things with limpets, and that was a 2-hour lecture, which we're not going to do now. But on many of the archaeological sites from this period of the Mesolithic, and we will come back to hazelnuts in other lectures, and we will come back to the Howick site in future lectures. We haven't finished with Howick today when we've done it. So the site of Howick was discovered by amateur archaeologists because they saw that the cliffs were eroding out very early flint objects, and there's a bit like the Hazelborough site, which I know Kathy's been to with us. It was a bit like the Hazelborough site. Hazelborough's being eroded away directly by the sea. Howick, the sea is coming in closer, and there's landslips, which are then all that's been eroded into the sea. So this site was found by complete accident when some flint tools were being eroded, and the amateur archaeologists said, in 1983, they went to professionals and said, look, we've got a major archaeological site here. Work was undertaken, but the biggest work was in 2000 and 2002, where most of our images come from. And what we do have is this wonderful black and white image of the site. You can see how close this is to the sea now today, and you can get an idea of of all the staining in there is ditches. Not start again. No, all the staining in there is pits, post holes, hearths, deposits of hazelnut shells, and so on. And the point I would like to make is that they've undertaken the archaeology to a very fine degree at Howick. They were able to try and understand what's going on with hazelnut shells. Now, I'm going to chuck something in here that we discussed on Tuesday. What we discussed on Tuesday was that within the archaeological data, we get thousands and thousands of hazelnut shells. And instead of taking a sample, we take all of them and we examine them. And why? Because why are the hazelnut shells being roasted? Is it so that they could be stored? Are the hazelnut shells being used as fuel because it's full of oils? What's going on with the hazelnut shells? Is it being used for a winter animal feed for pigs, for example, and all these wonderful things that have come through with hazelnut shells? And again, it's a wonderful piece of archaeological evidence. Putting that up there in the top. This is why we look at hazelnut shells today. So the main feature of the Howick landscape is to be defined within the following sentence. The Howick site is the best preserved Mesolithic hut site so far discovered in Britain. Is that right or wrong? I would say one of the earliest, not the best preserved. But I'm just going with my notes because Newcastle University want us to believe that they've got the best site. And why not? They're very proud of their work, and we're not going to undermine that. But I would say that there's another site just down the road, a Starcar, which we will have a look at, which is also an extreme perfection of archaeological preservation. So what they've got is as they worked across the site, obviously looking down on the archaeological excavations. I know this is not a brilliant black and white image. What they've done is they've taken radiocarbon dates from the hearths, and if we again we look at, we type in this one now. No, that's a Bronze Age remains. Back to this. All the staining in there, and obviously we've got some hearths in amongst them. So the radiocarbon dates from the hearths inside the hut have shown that it was constructed, the later of the huts, sometime around 9,800 years ago. So a good part of 10,000 years ago. Now, by 10,000 years ago, what we could say is that 10,000 years ago, what we could say is that there was obviously a very intense tree cover across this landscape. So the tree cover was dominating this landscape. So this site was probably on the top of a small hillock. It was surrounded in trees. It probably wasn't a vantage point because of all the trees. It probably wouldn't have had a good view. But again, we get the date of roughly 9,800 years ago, at least, that this site is dated from. And there might be some much earlier Mesolithic evidence as well. It is by far the earliest habitational site, not only from the Mesolithic period, the earliest habitational site found anywhere in Northumberland. So if we want to round this up to 10,000 years ago, and it's a key site for our understanding of the Mesolithic period. And what we mean by that is something that it's not a word that we've come across in recent lectures, but when you use the word key site, it's like the archetypal site for studying the Mesolithic period. It's like when we look at the Bronze Age and we look at the Neolithic period, we always think of Stonehenge, and we think of Avebury. Can you all bear with me a minute? This is driving me up the wall. Okay. Sorry about that, folks. So when we're talking about archetypal sites, when we think about, say, for example, if we think about the Roman period in Britain, the archetypal site for the Roman period would be Hadrian's Wall. If we want to talk maybe about the Paleolithic period, I would say Brinksworth would be the archetypal sites for the Paleolithic period in Britain, even though they've not been thoroughly investigated. So this is an archetypal site for the Mesolithic period, because it's been thoroughly researched and we've got so much data. We've got so much to understand from it. And it's very much into what I said at the beginning. And what I said at the beginning, I said that, you know, what we've got is that we've got sites that are intermingled and multifaceted, multi-mixed sites. That's what I was looking at the beginning. And when we think about this Mesolithic site, people have lived within this location for a very, very long time. And in the Bronze Age, there's these burial kists, for example. So if we come to this is with the image that I showed, we've got these burial kists there as well. So not only have we got this understanding with the Mesolithic period, we've got these Bronze Age kists on site, which sort of cut into the Mesolithic activity as well. It's sort of all sort of interlayered, as that writer Tim Ingold would tell us and have us to believe. So the site undertaken and the work undertaken at the site has been very meticulous, very, very detailed. They've sifted everything. They've gone through every single grain, and it's helped us to really understand this period in time. They've hopefully lost nothing. And because the other thing about this site is that if they don't do the research, the site's going to be gone anyway, because it's so close to slippage and it's so close to being completely eroded away. It's likely probably within the next 50 years, the site wouldn't even be there anyway. So it's in the nature of the archaeology that they get as much information as they can out of the site, and to be an archetypal site of the Mesolithic period in Britain, to tell us as much as we possibly can about the Mesolithic period in Britain. But what we can't say is that everybody lived like this in the Mesolithic period in Britain. That would be absolute nonsense, because there were still people living or associated with caves at this time. There were people who were purely hunter-gatherer. There were also people living within the localities all year round throughout the seasons. That's what the bone evidence tells us. We also know, for example, that people can live in one locality but still be hunter-gatherer people. So how does that work? Well, when we looked at Japanese society quite some time ago, when we looked at really early the Japanese world, and we started looking at all those things which were later, like the Yamon culture and so on, but we looked at lots of the earlier stuff. And when we looked at Japan, we had buildings and we had settlements and we had trackways and we had pathways and we had timber buildings and we had stone buildings and all the rest of it. But I still said that they really didn't go into their agriculture in a massive way. So they were still technically hunter-gatherer. So just because you're being given the terminology hunter-gatherer, it doesn't mean to say that you're living in a cave. I wanted to make that point. So when we look at archaeological sites like this, we use geophysical survey, we use field walking, and we do an environmental evidence of the landscape. And by doing an environmental evidence analysis of the landscape, what we do get is a landscape perspective. By obviously looking at some of the more meatier remains, such as the seal bones, such as the mollusks, we can get an idea to how and where they were accessing their resources. And also we've got evidence of pig at the site that would be indicative of woodland. So they lived within the woodland setting as well. So the archaeological evidence is giving us a really good idea from Howick what's going on. All archaeological deposits were passed through a sieve and a flotation tank. So this detailed approach to recording means that Howick now represents one of the most fully understood Mesolithic sites in Britain, if not the whole of Europe. Some archaeologists may argue that we just don't have time to do the work to the intense degree that I'm suggesting. Well, don't do it in the first place then. That's the answer. Don't do it. But if you have got the resources and you have got the personnel that's in regards to universities, then do it, and then you can get as much as you possibly can out of it, which is great. So, you know, the archaeological site that I'm actually sat upon today is important, and we're not going to rush it, and we're going to take our time with it. So when we've got the money to do the work. So this is what they've done with Howick. They've taken their time. So again, it was decided to work at the site because the site was under threat of being destroyed. They also undertook to do experimental archaeology at the site. So if we move on to another image and we go to here, experimental archaeology, building a reconstruction, building a clear and proper reconstruction of what they believe these buildings look like in the past. So you've got our one there, okay, and then you've got another one that they've also gone to reconstruct as well. So they've gone into building two types of buildings at Howick, and both of them try to get a grasp with how life should be and could be interpreted. But the biggest problem with interpretive archaeology is just that it is interpretive archaeology. Understanding the post holes in the archaeology here to making a reconstruction is in many ways all guesswork, and you get and there's the other example. So you've got two examples of these buildings which look very, very similar, very, very similar. And again, experimental archaeology is very, very important. And when we seek to understand experimental archaeology, what we are in essence doing is the best thing that we can do with a site like this is to allow it to decay. Don't do anything more on it. And when it's down to nothing, we then compare the decayed in reconstructed building with the actual archaeology in the ground, and then we can try to understand the different features in the ground. And this is a very, very important point. And I've mentioned what I'm about to mention before. Why experimental archaeology is so important. And I'll give you an example. And this is something that I've mentioned time and time again. So if we go with, for example, the whiteboard, and we go with this. A few years ago, they wanted to reconstruct a typical roundhouse. So we'll sort of give the sort of shape and form. We'll do a little bit of a reconstruction. They went to reconstruct a roundhouse. Now, in the archaeology, as they were looking at the archaeology, they could find that around the outside there was it seemingly like a little ditch, right? So what they did, they put a ditch around the outside of the building, and nobody argued with this. And then somebody else built another roundhouse, right? So what they did, they simply went across the grain, and they built another roundhouse without a ditch around it. And over the years, what they found was that as the water's going off the roof, it would create a depression around the building, right? That depression wasn't built for defense or anything at all. It was built because water was coming off the roof and creating a furrow around the entire building. Vis-a-vis, meaning that these were not a defensive ditch around the roundhouse at all. It was simply where the water had dripped off the roof, and it created a furrow around the building. And then the archaeologists were able to understand that this was wrong. And what you then need to do is this interpretation is because the water is coming off the roof. I'll give you another example of what we're talking about. So if we go with this, and I love the one that I'm just about to tell you now. Years ago, they also reconstructed a roundhouse, right? So if we look at the if we look at the bird's eye view, looking down on it, so we've got inside the roundhouse, right, and we've got the entranceway here, right, and it's got the roof as we described, you know, like this, and the roof goes down like that, and you've got a little entranceway, right? Now they decided to have a low-lying entranceway in this building, which is what I would say is that you have a low threshold for a timber building back in the day, roundhouse, and we'll explain all that when we get into the Iron Age lecture and these typical buildings and where the why the doorways should be quite low. It's to do with heat and so on, but we're not doing that today. Anyway, there was this, they had reconstructed this roundhouse and everything was fine. And the day had come that the archaeologist was to sleep in the roundhouse, right? So he slept in the roundhouse and he had a few chickens with him, right? And basically the door was closed, right? They had some kind of doorway. I don't know what the door was made of. Maybe it was a wooden door. I wasn't sure, right? But as the sun come up in the morning, dawn time, he could see light coming under the door, and he didn't think anything of it, and he went back to sleep. And then, as the morning came, there were all these chickens in the doorway, right? They were having a dust bath in the doorway, and he thought this was amazing. And the reason why he thought this was amazing was because the doorway is the first part of the building. If you haven't got a fire set, the doorway is the first part of the building that's going to heat up because there's wind coming underneath and the lights shining on the ground. It's where the chickens are going to go to have a dust bath, right? And he witnessed all this. And the reason why this is important is as follows. When the archaeologist originally undertook to do the reconstruction, they put a little bit of a dip in the doorway, thinking that the dip in the doorway was to do with wear and tear. It was a lot more than that. It was the wear and tear of the chickens, because it was the chickens having a dust bath in the doorway, and he witnessed this and he saw it. And if anyone's ever kept chickens, they always congregate to the doorway in the morning. So when you let them out, they all charge out the doorway because they're already there. That's where the chickens go. That's where they get ready to go out. And that's where it's warm, and that's where they can have a dust bath to get rid of the mites. And this is why reconstruction archaeology is so important. Anyway, back to where we were with Howick, and again, we're going crack on, and I'm just going to look at. We're going to share the screen now. And we're going to go back with the images, and we're going to go screen, and we're going to go start, and we're going to go back here, right? So again, we're going to set the scene, and we're going to try and get some images of the archaeology again. And there it is, a nice color image, and there it is. That's much better, that one. And again, back to my notes. So we know that they had done the reconstruction. They had reconstructed 2 huts, and I'm not sure that the hut's still there today. But if they start to decay and fall down, then so be it. It'll help us understand about the archaeology. They used birchwood and they used pine in the reconstruction. How accurate that is, I don't know. They would have needed to have used Scots pine. As Scots pine is a protected species, they had to use normal pine, the same type of stuff that you would that Christmas trees grow out of. So not large. So they use pine and birch in the reconstructions. The problem is using pine and birch in the reconstructions is that the pine decays quite rapidly, unlike the normal Scots pine. But then again, we can learn something from that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to mention a little bit more about these reconstructive buildings. And what they did, they did the reconstructive buildings. There's two different reconstructed buildings, a few meters away from the cliff tops. And what we are going to do is we're going to look at we're going to hopefully get some images of the howick reconstruction. And if I can just scroll through and hopefully get the right ones, which it should be actually on here. Nope, we're not getting it. Hang on. If I type in, we type in howick house reconstruction. I lost the images on Tuesday as well, so I don't know why. Right, okay. Well, we've got the two there. We'll just concentrate on the one. We'll just concentrate on that one. Right. So if we go there and we go there, so you can think it's a teepee-like construction. And what we've got is we've got these birch poles. Now, birch grows really well, and it usually, if you can get birch to grow really straight, it's great. And what's going on here is you've got these pine uprights, and you've got the lintels. So this inevitably supports the beech frame, beech poles. Birch poles. Did I say beech? Oh God, I get my sorry. A correction. Birch, not beech. Birch. Right. Birch poles. Sorry. So the birch poles, which are supported by the pine, which is not sort of Scots pine, as we've already mentioned, and then these were then reinforced and with ties between the birch, right? So down below you've got the uprights and the cross beams, and obviously the spars where it's all tied together. So if we can find one of the images, there we go. Nice. I knew it was there somewhere. I lost this on Tuesday altogether. Come on, image come up, please. Oh,
could I just ask about hazel? Hazel, is that a native tree?
Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
Right. And birches as well. Yeah.
Yeah, birch. I actually, what I'm going to do is explain a little bit more about that. I just if I want to get this image up there. Oh, nice. Actually, what we will do is we'll explain a little bit more about the materials, because this is really relevant, because we're still not done all that. So obviously the spars, this is all interlinked. Okay, the purlins, in other words, if you want to talk more sort of. But anyway, so what we've got the rest of the structure here, and we've got the spars, or you could refer to them as the purlins, and this is binding the whole structure together, right? So this is where everything's interlocked and it's structurally sound, and everything's really melded and sorted out. Now, it was decided to construct the roof out of turf, as the robust timber frame had clearly supported a heavy roof covering. Now, we're getting that from the ground. So obviously the size of the post holes in the ground indicate that it was quite a nice sizable roof, and it had and with the charring of some of the timber in the post holes, it was meant to last. And this building may have been rebuilt on exactly the same spot over at least 100 years. So what they do believe as well, that underneath the turf, there was a reed thatch, and the reed thatch would waterproof underneath the turfs. So it was decided to construct the roof out of turf, as the robust timber frame clearly supported a heavy roof covering. As I said, it is possible that the original roof may have consisted of a combination of turf and reed thatch, with the soil facing out and reed thatch pinned to this, creating an insulated, waterproof and flame retardant roof. So they did this. They undertook to reconstruct. But what I can clearly see is that what it's describing in the notes here is that they have used turfs on there. I can't see any evidence of reeds on there, actually, not in that reconstruction, but they are saying in the notes that they did use turfs, and that in the original building there would have been a reed thatch and turfs, right? So it's saying in the original building, the soil would have faced outwards. On this example, the soil is facing inwards, and that's what I'm seeing. So the reconstruction was undertaken in 4 days. So they managed to do it in 4 days. Actually, it is possible to do it in 4 days. It's possible to do as long as you've got the material available. If you've got all the material available, you're able to do it. Now back to some of the timbers. So at this time, the materials that would have been around 10,000 years ago, you would have had Scots pine. You would have definitely had birch. You would have had hazel. You may have had some aspen. Some of the oak trees were still on their way up, right? Or they had already got there, or there weren't as many of them. So what's happening is the little trees are making way, and obviously the little trees also sort of small to medium trees, like the rowan, which is another one of those trees that we mentioned, associated with Berrydale Wood last week. However, so we're thinking about all these timbers, and your elms and your oaks are probably on their way, and there's not many of them. So those are the materials. Hazel as well. So hazel and some of the willows like goat and crack willow. So some and white willow and grey willow and so on. So all of these willows are very useful, very supple wood, and you can use it sort of for the roofing structure. And yes, so all these materials were around. And usually, if you can get long lengths, now we have got long lengths in our own woodland here, but unfortunately, with our long lengths, the wood is rotten. So we've got to cut down that, and we just, if people want that wood to put, and then they can. We don't have many long lengths of birch, so we wouldn't be able to reconstruct this because we don't have the materials. But if you've got all the materials available, you can build something like this probably in less than 4 days, and they're saying 4 days anyway. So and they interestingly enough, as you can see, they're clearly building this in the winter months, and there's a reason for that. There's a reason for it. What they wanted to do, they wanted to reconstruct this. They wanted to reconstruct this in similar conditions to what they had in the day. So when I say winter months, my notes also say that obviously the sun's out, so the sun is shining. So what they tried to do is try to replicate the type of conditions that they used that were around when they were building this. So by having rain and wind and cold, it may have been of similar conditions that they were building a structure like this. And then the sun would shine, and they were doing a little bit more building. But again, building this in 4 days is doable. I'm not going to say it's a mean feat. It's doable. If I had the materials, I could build something like this if I had a small group in 4 days. So it's what I'm getting at is it's not an incredible feat. It's what they did. They did it every day. This was their life. So they would have been a lot better at building something like this than we would. So probably if they had the group there and they had all the materials, they could probably do this in 2 days, because we're learning still. So there you go. By learning, you're making mistakes, and obviously it's going to take longer. So the team of volunteers helped reconstruct the hut, weren't deterred by any of the conditions. It was the right thing to do. And the Howick Excavation Archive is out there to look at. The Howick Excavation Archive is fully available on the Archaeological Data Service website. We only refer to a little bit today, but the Archaeological Data Service website, details out there. And if you obviously wanted to see that, you type in Howick and it's all available for you to actually see. I've just clicked onto it now. It's great. There's some really nice information here. And you can click onto links and you can see various other things, and there's books out on it as well. There's a book entitled Mesolithic Settlement in the North Sea Basin, and you've also got a book called The Holocene Coastal Environmental Change and Geoarchaeology at Howick. There's lots of books out there, and another one, A Bronze Age Cemetery at Howick. Obviously that's about the Bronze Age, but it does actually mention the work that was being undertaken at Howick back in the day. So what I'm going to do now, I'm probably very aware of time, and I know that some of you want to finish at 12:30, and I'm going to probably I might actually right, if everybody, we can have a very, very short break at the time it takes for me to put the kettle on, and then obviously start. So we haven't got much of a break. So all of you guys in Lantern Major, try and prompt yourself. And I would say I'm always humbled that everybody does turn up every week, and I really appreciate your support. It does mean a lot to me. Try and keep things going, and we're going to. Okay, I'm going to think of how we're going to do questions. I think I know how we're going to do questions from Lantern Major. What I'll do, I won't have this on speaker, right? So if Steve cannot have his on speaker, if Steve speaks through questions, and I will talk about what those questions are, and I will answer them. So Steve, you've got a couple of minutes to you've got 2 minutes to get Steve to speak to me, and then I will, as you're saying them, I will say what those questions are, and I will answer them. Anne, anything you would like to ask?
Oh, I asked it, didn't I, about the trees, because I wondered if you know, I think I'm learning the Mesolithic period is a lot later than I thought. So yes. It's interesting, you know, to see what the land was like then, if we were connected and that sort of thing. It's just building up a picture, isn't it? Of
and a very, very interesting, fluid, interpretive picture. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you. No, it's very interesting. Thank you.
Yes, and I do want to know from Steve in a few moments what cake they're eating in Lanswick, but not yet. Henry, anything you'd like to say?
No, very interesting. I'll send you a link on another site up by Merseyside, where they've actually got evidence going back to 9,000 plus years, but of actual rebuilding on top of roundhouses. So over a couple of 100 years, I think.
Okay. So you've got here, come across a site called Lunt Meadows near River Acht. ALT. So if you put a double L in there, that would be a Welsh word. Seems to be a wetland site, 9,300 years old. Nice, love it. And you know what? That's going to join my analysis of another site next week, because next week we are going to be looking at. Hang on a minute. Where are we now? We're going to be looking at Radiocarbon. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to add Lunt Meadows to that, and we will look at that next week. So that would be a nice one. We're doing that next week. Right. By the way, Jane says, builders here. One of them looks very butch, so I've got to leave. May try and return later. Good to see you all, and saying good luck. So that's that. So anything you'd like to say, Goff?
No, it was very interesting. No, nothing, no questions.
Right. So what I'm going to do, we're going to put on. I'm going to phone Steve now, and Steve's going to speak through, so we don't have any feedback. So I'm going to phone Steve now. There's a song there, isn't there? Everything is wonderful. Right. Okay, Steve, it's ringing. Right. Yeah, it's good. So what cake are you eating? Ginger. Lucky. Any questions?
No.
Right. Okay. I'm gonna say that. So I think you've got a little bit of feedback that end, but I would say problems with that is the biggest problem with reconstructive archaeology. The biggest problem with reconstructive archaeology is using the right materials. I know full well by making hazel hurdles that hazel doesn't rot very quick.
What was the question?
Oh, right. Yeah, the question is did they actually, are they using the right materials when they do reconstruction? And I'm basically saying in some cases they don't, and unless you use the proper materials, you're not getting a good idea of what these sites were like in the past. Right, okay, so anything else, Steve? Right, okay. Anyway, thanks for that. So the biggest thing is Steve has been doing my class on a Wednesday evening, and one of the things I've been saying on a Wednesday evening is that the roof lines would have been a lot lower than what they're showing, and to be honest with you, the heights of the reconstructions look to me to be completely wrong. I know from experience that on when it's very windy, your roof line is very, very low, and yeah, that's a good assumption. So does that answer everything? Is this working over the phone now, or isn't it? Or is there feedback? All right, so it's okay, and everybody can hear me on the screen your end, yeah? Okay, no, that's fine. Okay, I've got feedback this end, but if you haven't, then that's fine. Okay, thanks a lot for that. We'll be back in a little while. 2 minutes. See you, Steve. Bye. Right, so that's basically it, Goff. So yeah, so I'm feeling that the roof lines are a bit taller than they should be.
Okay.
So anyway, quick break. I'll be back now.
Tea time.
It's going to be a short one. Oh, I'm going to, yeah, short one. understand. I don't understand what's happened. What's going on? Right, where are we, baby boomers? Arnold, the big question is, I think Arnold was a baby boomer, I think. Lynn was a baby boomer as well, I think. Right. Lunt site does say roof line was low, small posts going around building. Oh, now that's for next week, but no, that'd be good. So no, it'd be good to do the Lunt site. Thanks for the bringing that to me. So the Lunt site, that sort of answers one of the questions in Landscape Major. So the Lunt site does say roof line was low, small posts going around building. Yes.
Are there two hoiks?
Oh, there's hoik in America, I think. Yeah.
Oh no, I mean, because I got a friend. Oh, he was the one before you, Methodist minister.
Yeah.
Or lay preacher they were. They were both lay preachers, and
Yeah.
he was training to be a theologian, and she was a teacher already. And they lived in Pencoed on the common, you know. And then they moved. They had 3 children, and they moved to Hoyk. And it was on. They said it was the Scottish borders, you know.
Oh no, it's the same place.
Oh,
This is on the Scottish borders.
yeah. They've been there. They're really, you know, they lived in an old coalboard house, rented it, you know, and she used to make these lovely biscuits, you know, and they were a great couple, and but they were Methodist.
And you're going to start cracking me up now. Stop it. Right, okay.
They went to Hoyk to work in a comprehensive school. So actually, Hoyk has got a comprehensive school.
And
that must be further inland, I would think.
Yeah. And shut up.
All right.
I thought I'd say it. I just wanted to get in control of this, right? So, what we learnt about the Hoyk site so far, we've learned that it's a site that we've seen reconstructions associated with it. It's got a nice set of archaeological data, and we're going to go back to that plan in a moment. And what I then want to do, I think we might be I'm running up against it time-wise today, so I'm going to really crack on. So let's just see what we can get from the images again, and get these up on the screen. And we go, yeah, there we go, straight to the plan, which is where I wanted to be. So we've had a few big statements made about this site. You know, it's a major archaeological site. It's a site that's been really well worked, and we really understand it well. And from the site, from very early on, we've got a number of Flint tool artifacts, and we've got them being, as we've already said in last week, we looked at, for example, microliths, and investigations found a circle of substantial post holes 6 meters across, and the post holes themselves showed signs in the post holes, in the hole in the ground there where the post would have settled. There was evidence of charcoal staining, so obviously the posts had been burnt before being placed into the ground to give them preservation properties. And what we do see, it's describing in my notes outside the hollow of the site itself. They immediately, this is an interesting thing. The house was built. It built in a depression. They created a depression, so it was slightly sunken into the ground, which is a characteristic which we see with Anglo-Saxon buildings as well. And so investigating this and the small holes for the posts, And inside the house, there were a number of shallow hearths filled with charcoal, burnt nutshells, and some fragments of bone. Now, this is really interesting because this leads us into discussing hazelnuts with other sites. There's a site on the Isle of Skye that we mentioned, hazelnut shells, and the archaeological data from the Isle of Skye, which is hundreds of miles away, sort of links a little bit in with this site, and you know, we're going to do a little bit of comparison. So just quickly mentioning these hearths, those are the hearths there, these here, and if we look at the image actually does it more justice. So if we look back to an image, and we go and we look at the archaeology of the site, what this one, this is there we go. Look at that, really nice there, seeing all the hollows. You can see that there's a lot going on in amongst the post holes, which are in the center of the screen, and you've got evidence of some more post holes on the right of the screen. You've got all these hollows in the middle, and all these little depressions and hollows filled with charcoal, burnt nutshells, and fragments of bone. Again, repeating that several times, because why is there so many burnt nutshells in these hearths? What are they doing with them? The answer is they must be using the nutshells as fuel. I did discuss this, and we'll mention this a little bit with the hazelnut shells as well. I did discuss this, that they may have actually collected these in August, September, and they may have stockpiled them to actually use as fuel in the winter months, because when the hazelnuts dry out, you know, the oil inside them gets really potent, and they act as a good fuel. But then again, you're going to want to eat the contents of the nuts as well, so you might just be burning the shells. The jury is out. So radiocarbon dating of these hazelnut shells gives us that date that we've mentioned of nearly 9,000 years ago, to be precise, 9,800 years ago or thereabouts. And lots of headlines back in the day when they started coming up with these dates in the 2000s of this being Britain's oldest house. But there's that great debate, because when we look at Star Car, what we do find is that there's a big sort of conjuncted argument between what's going on at Star Car. And the problem is with what's going on at Star. Right, I'm going to chuck this in here because I might forget it when we do it. Right, when we look at Star Car, you look at the work of Gordon Charred at Star Car, which is brilliant. However, Gordon Charred wasn't meticulous in keeping every piece of data. They did keep every single piece of data with this site. So what that means that there's a bias in the archaeological record. We could say, oh, they know what we're going on at Howick, because, or we can get a better idea. But we don't have all the same evidence of Star Car because it wasn't all kept in the earlier excavations. So that's the problem when we're doing the comparison. They've been doing more recent work at Star Car in 2010 and more since, and re-evaluating the archaeological evidence of Star Car. And maybe the archaeological evidence of Star Car tells us that the buildings were constructed beyond 10,000 years ago, which then ties us in with the tree line theory that we've obviously got trees in that area by at least 10,500 years ago. And Star Car's in Yorkshire. So some of the hearths themselves show signs that the nuts shells were used for burning. But however, there's also this idea that they're actually roasting the nuts, roasting them, and then they're discarded into the fire. So you've got lots of different interpretations. I know some of you are thinking, well, it's obvious that they're eating the contents of the nuts and chucking the shells into the fire because they're roasting them, or that then again they've dried them over the winter months. You need fuel in the winter months as well, so you've got to be very careful how they did it. They did everything with them. I
think we ought to have an experiment with hazelnuts.
Yeah, but we're going to eat them though. I love hazelnuts.
Yeah, we'll have to. I mean, I've got hazelnuts in the garden. I noticed the shells in the garden, and they look really like you could use them for something. You know, there's a lot of them. So
Yes,
I think I should try and burn them.
Well, actually, I got 4 acres of land here. Maybe we could all come up one day and have these hazelnuts and see which
we could do. Yeah,
we could. So, and also the other thing as well is tying in with the stuff with limpets. We've got numbers of shells suggest that food was cooked here in quantity. So now there was this obsession. Now I'm going to be very clear. When you look at the reading, when you look at the notes associated with this site of Howick, it does make a habit of saying, "Oh, this is just a hazelnut shell processing site." Well, where did they live? And then now this is key to understanding the archaeology. If you just looked at the hazelnut shells and you just thought, right, what we're going to do, we're just going to discard the evidence of, we're just going to discard all the other evidence, then you could be right. It's a hazelnut shell processing site. But what there is evidence of bones of various fish and seal bones, and there's evidence of shells. So in other words, it's not there's all this material lying around because they were obviously eating it and doing all sorts of things with it. And seeing as the site's being used over 100 years, can you imagine the amount of crap that's going to be there anyway?
Yeah.
And also the site's been eroded and damaged, and there's slippage and bits of the archaeology being lost. And up until recent years, they used to plough there. So, you know, what they are finding there is massive. But we don't have the full picture. That's the thing. So whatever picture that we do have, we seize onto it and we use that and we try to understand the past. There's also other archaeologists arguing that there's a scarcity of food, and I'm going to say no, there's not. Sorry, there's not. They're living in right. The reason why I'm going to say that, and some of you are thinking, "Oh, Karl, you've gone too far this time." The reason why I'm saying that these people have not got much competition from other people. There's not many people living there, so they are bountiful. They know the landscape, so there's going to be lots of food around all the time. And this is the point. When you look at Starcar, when you look at Starcar, there's lots of archaeological evidence of Starcar, and they say, "Oh, you know, this was a site that they only came to in the summer because they couldn't get food for the rest of the times of the year." Then they say, "Oh, actually, you're finding hazelnut shells here, and you're finding stuff that's only available in the winter. So how does that come in with it?" So there is, and if you've got a small population of people as well, you could survive quite well. Yeah. Now, for example, we sell gorse flowers, right? And a couple of months ago, there was a hell of a lot of gorse growing here, right? And if we'd have harvested it all, right, we could have sold loads of it, but we didn't. And now we got people wanting the gorse flowers. And the point is, we didn't think it was going to be that popular. So next year we're going to have buckets and bucket loads of gorse flowers, right? And we you know, that's because we didn't know, but these people knew. They ain't like us. They ain't like us at all. They knew how to survive. They and we've got grandparents that used to have jars of pickles and all the rest of it in the cupboard because they did it because they needed to eat in the winter. So things weren't scarce at all. Together with the very substantial construction shown by the size of the post holes, this led to the view that the house was occupied permanently. This is what I feel, rather than transiently or seasonal. And one thing that I would say, this is the argument that I use with Starcar, that when they look at Starcar, they say that these buildings were only used in the summer months and they buggered off to the coast in the winter, right? But hang on a minute, if you leave a building abandoned, someone else is going to move in there. I know there's not many people around, but if somebody says, "Oh my God, there's a house here, we'll move into it, it's ours." You know what I mean? I know there's not many people around, but you know, eventually somebody's going to grab your house. You're going to keep hold of it. And if you're going to spend so much effort into harvesting wood, this is the point I make. If you're going to spend so much effort into harvesting wood and going through the efforts of building a building, you're going to want to live there. I'm sorry. So it disagrees with what Gordon Charred was saying, but it also says what lots of other archaeologists are also saying now as well. So the charred hazelnut shells have not only been found at this site, as we will see, will be found that the Scottish site at Cramond. We're looking at Skye. We'll be looking at Starcombe. We're looking at hazelnut shells being used at lots of other sites. Now, the problem is finding hazelnut shells everywhere and finding limpet shells associated. Hang on a minute. And finding limpet shells at different sites. Can everybody bear with me a minute? Hang on a minute. Just stay there. Stay there. Hang on. Hello? Sorry about that. Sorry. Are you all there, people?
Yes.
Right. Sorry. I
Everyone else is on mute.
Right. Sorry. Everyone else is on mute. So yes, smack bang in the middle of teaching, and it wasn't good. Whoever it was. Yeah. Anyway. So where are we again? So what we're going to go is that what we do find is that I was trying to make the point. And I wish people wouldn't phone me while I'm teaching. I was trying to make the point that we've got all these limpet shells, and we got these hazelnut shells, and we've got all this other evidence from the Mesolithic period, and you start to think, well, you know, is it are they just eating limpets in this period? Are they just eating hazelnuts in this period? But people have always eaten limpets, and the people have always eaten hazelnuts. Yeah. You were talking about them. Just because we find a lot of evidence in the Mesolithic period, it doesn't mean to say that's all they ate. It's just that it was very popular, and it was very easy for them to come by. And they did have these larders of food. It's like today, Anne, right? They didn't eat beans back then, but we eat lots of beans today. It's just like one of those fashion things. It doesn't mean to say there wasn't other food around, but there was other food around. We do find it on these archaeological sites, but it's just there's a lot of hazelnut shells and limpets at this stage. So the interpretation that this was a permanent residence for hunter-gatherers is supported by the analysis of howick. We mentioned the word hunter-gatherers living at this site permanently, and what we've got there is that the natural resources would have allowed all year-round occupation. So going back to that, I said earlier on that, you know, there wasn't enough food, and then suddenly even my notes are saying that they had all year-round occupation. And again, this is the problem. My note says its coastal position. Again, I'm struggling with the evidence. I even went on record on Tuesday and said, am I wrong? Am I wrong in saying this wasn't a coastal site? And then I said, right, I want to be wrong, but it can't have been a coastal site back then because it would have eroded away into the sea by now, right? Because it's very soft soil. So I'm thinking it's very near an estuary. There would have been some kind of estuary there, right? So it would have had everything. So that ties in with my theory, right? That it's not directly on the coast. It's within an estuary. And what we have is with that estuary, we've got evidence of flint for tools, right? There's lots of wood around for building and fuel, right? There's lots of other animals around. There's evidence of fish, right? Sea and fresh water. There's seal meat. Well, they must have come into the estuary. Seabirds and other birds as well. Lots of shellfish, right? And shellfish that come from a fresh water source as well. So that ties in with my estuary theory, right? So it's not by the coast. It's within sort of an estuarine inlet, and this is why it survived. I'm going to go with that. And if anyone wants to tell me I'm wrong, then fair enough. I'm okay to be wrong. And what we do find with this site is really diverse, very complicated, and there's a lot going on. I'm glad what we've been very sensible today is just focusing on the sense of occupation, living, and so on. Many sites from this time, what we do find are coastal, like the limpet shell mounds on the Isle of Skye and Aronsea and so on. But again, they're living closer to the margins. Because there's lots of trees everywhere, so they had no choice other than to live on the margins between fresh and sea water landscapes and the tree line, right? And I'm glad we don't talk about ceremonial evidence and all the rest of it, but we talk about permanent settlement. So the other thing I want to go on to now is we've had this image up there for a while, and again, let's just go with sort of get an idea of these reconstructions and how the sort of reconstruction, one of the reconstruction looks today. And if we go back to, so we've done that, and right. So this little piece here is basically what there is that the Great Museum of the North in Newcastle upon Tyne has lots of the artifacts from this site. And what I'd like to do is mention some more detail here. Right, this is sort of gives a bit of an update. So what we think is that particularly at this site where they've done the reconstruction of this building, based on what evidence they've got, and you've got two types of buildings that they've reconstructed. This is the more plausible one, and they're talking about various different layers of deposits all mixed up, all sort of interlocked and for different time spans. It is not, and there's this thing. There's this thing about I don't agree with it being seasonal. I don't. And when you use the word semi-permanent, what is semi-permanent? What does that mean? Does it mean that one person lived there and everybody else went off? I don't know. Or permanent. Now, these figures, I needed to read this bit out. If we didn't do anything else, this bit here. A total of 18,000 pieces of flint were recovered. 18,000. That's a lot of flint. However, that's only a fraction of the flint that would have been there on the site at one time, because obviously all the top layers have been taken off through ploughing and all the rest of it. Only a small fraction is actually shown in the museum. Now, it's discussing a large amount of burnt hazelnut shells. Again, we're talking about a large amount, and associated with evidence of these seal bones, and they've done sedimentary coring evidence, and they've really tried to understand the site and to put it into a perspective that we can actually understand. Now, what I am going to mention is some more notes, and then we'll sort of go on to the hazelnut shells, and then we'll sort of call it a day. And there's this little bit of information that I wanted to do here, but I was very wary that I need to do this. And obviously, within the stains of the series of pits and scoops in the ground, what we can say is that disregarding the hazelnut shells, within this next bit, we can't disregard them, but we're not going to say any more about them. The occupation layers show not only flint, but evidence of ochre. There's ochre on the site. We mentioned ochre in regards to Paleolithic sites. Lots of shell fragments and bone. Burnt bone. We mentioned burnt bone. We didn't say much about the burnt bone at all, but I will mention something about the burnt bone. The radiocarbon dates, amazingly enough, 33 radiocarbon dates from the site. Remember, a radiocarbon date, the last time I looked at radiocarbon dating, a sample to be radiocarbon dating costs about 200 quid. So 33 dates, that must have been a lot of money. So they managed to get around about that date of around 9,800 years ago. Now, within the bone, they've got evidence of wild pig. They would have rooted around woodland. They're not a coastal animal. Fox, yeah, that can come here, go day, God send Sunday. You can have foxes along the coast. But pig, wild pig, is going to be rooting around woodland. Right, birds, various different types of birds, and this is key. And I'm going to come back to this in another lecture. Right, the evidence of the remains of bones of a wolf within the archaeology, or that has been interpreted as evidence of a domesticated dog, which is then coming into your idea of animal husbandry. Big question is there any other evidence of agriculture within the archaeology? Well, I would say my evidence is hazelnuts. So what we are going to do now is finally, we're going to do the last bit of the lecture that leads us directly into hazelnuts. And here we go. And I would like to go there, and we're going to do hazelnut shells. Right, here we go. This one. Right, hang on a minute. if I can get that there. There we go. There they are excavating, and there is an image here of hazelnut shells. Hang on a minute, hazelnuts. Just going to double check that this is the one I wanted to show you. This is the Threve site, right? Excavating at Threve. It's not actually the hazelnut site I wanted to show you, but we're going to do this anyway. Right, this site itself, this brings us into hazelnut shells, and then we'll do the site on the Isle of Skye, and then that's calling it a day, right? Right. So this is from an article in the Smithsonian magazine. Hazelnut shell shed light on life in Scotland more than 10,000 years ago. Now they were excavating on this site, and they didn't find a lot of hazelnut shells on this site. It's a site called Threve in Dumfries and Galloway in the heart of Scotland. A burnt shell of a hazelnut, and this was radiocarbon dated. And amazingly, much further north than Howick, this hazelnut shell dated approximately, wait for it, not to 10,000 years ago, but 10,547 years ago, which takes us at the boundary of the tree line, right? Within the heart of Scotland, so 10,500 years ago. So they found this wonderful piece of archaeological evidence. And you know what's happening here? Hang on, we've got an advert. We don't want the advert there. We got there we go, back to this image, right? There we go, back to that. And over the years we have gradually built up an understanding of past human activity at Threve. And this radiocarbon date for Mesolithic activity is really exciting, as it is the first evidence we have from this time and is the earliest date recovered at Threve so far. And it's one of the earliest dates in Scotland. However, they're talking about evidence of people in Scotland more or less directly at the time the ice is melting. There is evidence of there is evidence of Loch Lomond, that there is something going on. Archaeologists recognize hazelnuts as a common food for people in the region, and it's a massive common food. Not only when you look at Scotland and the islands, it's also a massive section of evidence associated with limpet shells as well. So the one thing is that the people who left these shells, and it's gone into shells, and it's talking about shells, and it's talking about the hazelnuts as being sort of not really distinguishable, because we're finding limpets and hazelnuts, particularly in that part of Scotland, very much together quite a lot. So we're talking about that. That was a bit vague. So what I want to do now is I want to go with this one now. It's the one on Skye, and this is the one what I want to finish with. So it's on Skye. This is associated with the University of Highlands and Islands. And I'm going to quickly get my notes up on here because I don't know where they are. So I'm just going to, if you can all bear with me a moment. If we can all bear with me, and if I do that and I do that, that's good. Thank you. And I'm going to get this up on here because this is really exciting. The Smithsonian one's a bit more vague, so I struggled with that one. So if I did that on Wednesday, so Skye, Mesolithic, make sure I get this in. Yeah, hazelnuts, this is the one. So this is from the BBC website, so we got that there. This is back from 2015. They are hazelnut shells. They're hazelnut shells there. The remains of hazelnuts eaten by some of Skye's earliest inhabitants, found on an excavation back in 2015 by the University of Highlands and Islands. Hazelnuts were a favourite snack of Mesolithic hunter-gatherers. And we know that, we've established that, we said that over and over again throughout the whole lecture. So the shells found date from towards the later part of our Mesolithic. Not this is interesting. This is rather interesting, right? And yes, Kathy met that woman, and I met that woman as well. She was the one. She was the one in the laboratory, Kathy, who was showing us around. So back all those years ago. So it was staffing on the Isle of Skye that they were excavating, and the reason why this is really, really important that we see that they're still eating hazelnut shells in large quantities. 8,000 years ago, 8,500 years ago, at the end of the Mesolithic coming into the Neolithic period, is that they seemingly are eating these hazelnut shells, massively representative in the archaeological data, for over 2,000 years. So it's a staple food. Even though they're eating lots of other things, they still love their hazelnut shells. I love this article because it's really, really illustrated. There we go. And what we've got them separating there, the hazelnut shells and the other bones. And I think the differentiation is these are mammal bones. Those are hazelnut shells. And if I'm thinking they might be a fowl, I'm not sure on the right there, but we're doing the hazelnut shells there. And this is only from a small area of the excavation. They didn't actually, if you look at the area that they're excavating, this is nowhere the size of the excavation that we were undertaking at Howick. So it's only a small sample, but even then it's only a small sample. There's a lot going on. There's a lot going on in the archaeology, a lot. So hang on a minute. So there's a lot going on in the archaeology, a lot. And what I'm trying to say about they only had 5 days to excavate, not the months that Newcastle excavated at Howick. So we have found lots of fragments of charred hazelnut shells in the lower soil samples. They are the ideal thing to date as they have a short lifespan, but they were used for a long time in the Mesolithic period. There is so much material in the samples we took that we didn't think we had the budget to analyze them, but they did. And I think they have been looking at them for quite some time. So we have what we need for now to allow us to date the Mesolithic activity at the site and understand it. And finally, just this one little thing as well. This one little thing, and I'm thinking that I'm not sure that this is the one. Hang on, is that it there? Oh, we've got it. I didn't know we had this, but I'm going to show you this. It also talks about a little toggle, which is that there. And there it is, a little bone toggle. And obviously indicating that they had coats and things and so on. So it's a toggle, a fastening for some kind of garment, and they actually found that at the site. But you know what? Again, more about Staffing Island and the Mesolithic finds again, and then what we'll do, and we'll also come back to Howick, and we've got to do the dog. So what I'm going to do now is we've left that very vague about hazelnut shells today, and probably a reason because we're going to be coming across them again. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to stop that now. And Anne, any questions?
I wondered if, because they didn't have any coal in those days, and when they burnt fire, they burnt wood and maybe put the hazelnuts on top to kind of damp it down and, keep the fire going, And then those shells, they obviously still almost exist. They're like cinders, like they'd be like the cinders of coal, and maybe they were used for, pathways or put in the house to make floors, that sort of thing.
Oh yeah, exactly.
I think they've used for so many different things that we will see them forever.
Yes, we will. Yes, we will. Exactly. Yes, we will. Right. Yeah. No, you're right. Used for lots of different things. That's what I would go with.
I always remember. Right. Yeah. Sorry. Go on.
No,
I always remember you saying about the theatre in London that was excavated.
Right. Yes.
And it's full of, you know, hazelnuts.
Yeah,
Hazelnut
the
shells.
theatre.
But
Hazelnuts
anyway,
everywhere. Exactly.
Tudor times that was.
Yeah, we did. Yeah,
Okay.
no, we did. Hey, and obviously hazelnut shells still very popular then. Exactly. So
Yeah.
it's not just a Mesolithic period. That is the point. Even though what we've done in the Mesolithic period, we've focused on hazelnut shells. However, there's hazelnut shells in lots of other periods, with lots of other evidence. So it sort of biases it a little bit. Right, Henry. Anything?
No questions at all. Found it quite very interesting. I've been doing a bit of reading around, and I think the Flint site has similarities to the Howick site.
Yeah. And you mentioned Staffing Bay as well, so that's what we will be doing again as well.
Thank you.
So lots to get on with. Thank you very much. And Goff, anything you'd like to say, darling?
No, very interesting. Look forward to next week.
Right. Okay. What I'm going to do now? I'm gonna. Obviously, we will be doing next week, and obviously we've got one of the sites that we've got the Flint site that we'll be looking at. We've got Radiocarbon Dates in Yorkshire next week, and that's what we're doing. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to phone Steve now and see if there's anything that he would like to tell us, and then we'll call it a day. Steve, I'm phoning you now. So go on. I'm phoning Steve now. Yeah, I'm okay. Anything anyone wants to ask in the room? Okay, I'll see you all next week, yeah? Take care, guys. I'll see you all next week. So what we're going to do, we'll finish that now. So anyway, thanks for that. So everybody, anyway, thanks. No, that's it for this week. So Henry, I'll see you next week. Anne, I'll see you next week. Goff, I'll see you next week. And everybody in Lantwick, we'll see you next week. Thanks for your support and appreciate that very, very much. And if there's nothing anyone else wants to say, we'll call it a day now. Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye, Anne.
Golf, enjoy Top Gun.
Bye-bye, Henry.
Bye.
And bye-bye to Jane. Oh, Jane went, and you've got everybody, Steve, Keith, Kathy, Lynn, Karen, Chris, the other Chris, and everybody else. Anyway, thank you very much. Take care, guys. Bye. 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 If you leave me now, la 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 la. La, 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 la. Right, okay. That was a weird one today. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Right, that's good. Everybody done? Right, that was fine. Anyway, thanks for watching. So I'm just going to go through the chat, actually. So sorry about the phone calls. So, right, so Henry said about come across a site called Lunt Meadows near River Alt. Seems to be a wetland site, 9,300 years old. Okay, fair enough, fair enough. Bill, oh, right, okay, thank you. Jane had to go. Builders here may try and return later. Good to see you all. Good to see you, Jane. You got this. Good luck from Anne. Thank you. Henry mentioned the Lunt site does say roof line was low, small posts going around building. Thank you. And also Staffing Bay. Thank you very much. So yes, Lunt site does say roof line was low, small posts going around building. Yeah, true. And Staffing Bay. Anyway, thank you very much, everybody. Yes, thank you very much. Anyway, that's me done today. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and go from there. Thank you. Like and subscribe. Like and subscribe. I thought that was quite ironic, the Staffing Bay one at the end there.